And welcome to our restarted Inside the Paint show, brought by our new sponsor, Red Recover. I want to welcome in Kurt Helin, who I've actually worked with about a decade ago when I was writing for NBC Sports, because I've written for anyone and everyone. But unlike me, Kurt's been able to keep a steady job for almost into 2 decades now. So we welcome our West Coast correspondent. And I think what we're going to do a little bit more now, we're going to be Heat-centric, because that's what we are in the Big O show. We're live, we're local. But I also want to expand it out to sort of what the outside view and what's going on. And Kurt, I cannot think of another week where there's so many national aspects that touch on locally and so many different directions to go. So I'm still going to hit you up lightning round, I think, in our first segment to get all the national stuff out of the way so we can get into the Miami Heat juicy bits. I guess something that happened overnight, and you're from the West Coast, so you sort of know this. Vin Scully and the iconic measure of a man from the West Coast, maybe the most iconic baseball announcer of our generation, and let's be honest, 2 or 3 generations before. Kurt, can you sort of give us perspective in the West Coast of what Vin Scully meant? How does he sort of rank or count up there with maybe a Chick Hearn as a voice of basketball? And then your thoughts on, if Vin Scully was the iconic voice of baseball for the last half century, who in your view is the iconic voice of the NBA?
Right. First off, it's really hard if you didn't grow up in LA. And what you and I and Ira and Big O, we're kind of a little bit of an older generation when, we listen to games on radio. Like we listen to games and Vin Scully simulcast out here. I think my favorite line was the creator of the X-Files named a character Scully, right? Mm-hmm. It was Mulder and Scully on the X-Files. That was named after Vin Scully because he said that's the voice of God in Los Angeles. It really was part of my childhood. There was, my wife and I sat here kind of just stunned when we saw the news last night because we'd grown up. People brought radios to the Dodger game so they could listen to Vin Scully while in the stadium watching the game. He was somebody that really, his kind of gentle tones and stories just, it's really hard to describe how embedded and ingrained he was in Los Angeles. And I'm not sure, I've had this conversation with other people. I mean, we had Chick Hearn and you go Johnny Most and Miami's had the same announcers, which by the way, for somebody who flips around League Pass and you do this a little bit, you listen to a lot of different games. Sure. Heat broadcast, I don't think you realize how good the Heat broadcast is.
Eric Reed's been a constant. Yeah. He's been on since day one. He started as an analyst for the first couple of years. Yeah. Now he is the kaboom king of the NBA. Yeah. He's worked with a variety of co-hosts. Mike Fratello, Tony Fiorentino. Now he's with John Crotty. He's Sam Smith. He started with the announcer, not the writer, early on. Is there a national voice? Has Mike Breen gotten there yet?
I don't know that Breen's got there. It was Marv Albert, but he's kind of, Marv Albert's time has passed. I'm not sure if I don't think he's doing games anymore as of this year.
No, last year, actually, this past year was his first year off. That's why they changed the whole thing for the finals there. We saw more Kevin Harlan at the end there. Yeah. I'm just trying to think.
I don't know that there's, even in baseball, there's Joe Buck or what have you, who does some football, but I don't know that there's a voice. But I think part of that isn't that we all, and especially younger generations, they just consume the media differently, right? Like you're not listening to 9 innings of a baseball game the way I did, because as a young kid, that was the only way I knew what was actually going on. I'd listen to the game. I'd pick up the paper the next morning and see if, the Dodgers won or lost, or, did Oral Hershiser get another shutout? What did Kirk Gibson do as a growing up a Dodger fan? By the way, growing up a Dodger fan and now having this team that just buys everything is a weird experience.
But winning is good. So anyway, I wanted to touch on that early. I also just now want to sort of reset a little bit. Tell the people down here in South Florida and really across the country, because Big O show is everywhere, and what we're going to sort of be hearing for the next few weeks and upcoming months on Inside the Paint, brought to you by Red Recover. Who is Kurt Helin? And sort of what is his NBA background? Because the one thing is, I'm going to look here at the chat board. Please feel free, just like always, people, to go out there, jump on our YouTube chat board. We'll read some of the texts as we go along in the show. So you know who you're going to be mocking and you know who you're going to be talking back to. Kurt, tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us a little bit of your background so people will know just how much national scope and how long you've been doing this.
Yeah, but please bring the mocking. I'm ready for the mocking. I'm all good. Look, I like a lot of you. I grew up a basketball fan. I played a little in high school, and my 6-foot frame and I can probably clear a phone book vertical was not going to get me very far as a player. I came out of a journalism background. I have a journalism degree, but I started doing this. I started a Laker blog. It still exists, called Forum Blue and Gold, run by Darius Soriano. Now, I started that back in 2004 because the Lakers had traded Shaq, and things were it was changing. All anybody wanted to talk about was Shaq Kobe drama, and I'm like, have you watched this team? And like, we were just starting to get analytics. We were just starting to break down, like the advanced stats were just starting to come out. Dean Oliver had just written his book. And so I kind of just brought a new perspective, wrote that, which was picked up by ESPN, did that for a while, and ultimately started writing for NBC here in LA about the Lakers, and then a little bit about the Dodgers and some other stuff, and got picked up to do this nationally by NBC. But that was 12 years ago. I got picked up in 2010. You, like I said, you were at the time writing for NBC, and they've gone through, like many digital companies, a whole lot of changes. But I've been doing this full time since 2010 and covering the league, writing and getting paid for it, frankly, since about 2004. And been fortunate. Like, it's, I don't know about you. I came out of my journalism background before that was covering courts, was covering police, was, we'll call it real journalism you want, traditional stuff. A cub reporter, it's the same skill set. It's the same, hey, you got to develop contacts, you got to do it. It's just fun. It's just, you're writing about, there's serious things certainly come up, but at the end of the day, it's entertainment and it's fun. And I treat it that way. I believe that, like, it's not life and death usually, it's certainly not on the court. And we should be entertained by Kevin Durant trade rumors and Tyler Hero, extension talk and whatever else.
So little thing you mentioned to me in our chat before we got started here that I thought was interesting, especially since I'm from the franchise who retires any and every number, which is why Dan Marino's jersey's up at FTX Arena at 601 Biscayne Boulevard, why Michael Jordan's jersey number 23 is up there. Bill Russell, I would agree, the most iconic NBA player when you take on-court achievement. I mean, let's face it, his NBA championships dwarf what Michael Jordan did as far as that. Then you have his off-court work also, what he's done in the civil rights area and other areas. So you have number 6, which actually is interesting because you have the Miami Heat eventually going to retire that number. There is no doubt in my mind.
Oh, yeah.
No, not Mario Chalmers. LeBron James is the reason they retire that number. So that'll be done. I know a lot of times people don't want to make something national, something local, where you take something out of play. And even, you even had, after Jackie Robinson's number was retired, some players who wore the number continuing to wear it. Adam Silver, I don't want to say he's in a tough position because right now we're still in a period of mourning. It's not the right time to do it.
Yeah.
Do you think number 6 should be retired across the NBA in honor of the legacy of Bill Russell?
Yeah, it's funny because my gut reaction to that was no. My gut reaction at first was, no, you don't do that. But I think this is the exception to the rule to me. The more I thought about it, the more I thought about his impact. First off, when you read about it, and this is, I wrote a couple of obits and stuff I'd researched for a couple of years. It was on the court he made a bigger change than we thought, because at the time when he came into the league as a defender, you were told, stay down, stay in your position, get in front of the guy, and if he shoots over you, he shoots over you. He comes in and tries this crazy thing where he jumps up and blocks shots, Ira.
Yes.
Like he started playing this African-American game above the rim as it was played in other places. Elgin Baylor comes through and it kind of takes it to another level with his grace and style after that. But suddenly the game is being played in a different way above the rim, and he really changes it on the court, not to mention, I think, the more important stuff off the court where he is putting up with everything. I think he is, marching with Martin Luther King, but also everything he's changing in Boston and changing attitudes. I think he's the exception. I think that I would be good with this. I'm with you. You can't do it yet. It's too soon. It's right. It's too fast. It's emotional, but this is the one case where I think the exception works with the rule. And you're right. It's not going to be, look, LeBron 6 will be retired in a couple of cities, 3 cities, at least, I would imagine. And there's some other ones out there. At the end of the day, I think you can do it.
Let me interrupt you there because we know the Cavaliers are going to retire LeBron James's number. He brought them their championship. We understand that. Tormented franchise all those years, local product. I get that.
Yeah.
When you look from the distance and you see how LeBron both came in and went out of Miami, came in, big celebration, not one, not two, not three, not four, not five, not six, got to the finals all 4 of his years in the city, won 2 championships there, but then also denied Pat Riley the chance to endure. Based on how you want to talk about that meeting in Las Vegas, he wouldn't even take the meeting with Pat Riley. Andy Ellisberg was out in the hallway. They had championship trophies. LeBron was watching a soccer game, couldn't be bothered. It's sort of this whole player empowerment, that thing that took over from an outside view. If I were to tell you, hey, the Heat have already retired the numbers of Tim Hardaway and Alonzo Mourning, have done it for Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade, and clearly they're waiting for the next number before they consider any others to be LeBron James. Does that surprise you? Or did you expect that even if your tenure's only 4 years, if you make the final all 4 years, you get your jersey retired?
And you win a couple rings and you have this great era. I think that's the break line. When you become, first off, I think we'll safely say a Hall of Fame player. I think we can say
first ballot, unanimous, or else you just change the electorate. Totally agree.
I think that because of that, he's kind of the exception to the rule. You absolutely put him in as the Heat. The Lakers, frankly, will do it as well. I don't know. They have a rule of thumb, which is Hall of Fame. If you played Hall of Fame and you played a role, and in his case, obviously in a championship in LA, they will retire him. I think as the Heat, you kind of, with considering, like you said, they've retired. They're pretty quick to retire sometimes. I think that this is the guy you've got to. I mean, at the end of the day, LeBron is going to go down as, however you want to define it, one of the 2, one of the 3, one of the top Mount Rushmore NBA players of all time. I think that's a guy you put up there.
Kurt, do you think the Lakers do? Or do you think there has to be another championship? It's just one championship. It's a bubble championship. We don't know. He might wind up playing with his son and maybe playing longer than we thought because of that. Is he on the cusp? Is he on the edge? Does one more championship do it? Or is that such a legacy franchise? Almost like, you know what it's like to go to, first Boston Garden, now TD Garden. They don't even have individual banners. They have so many numbers. They have a big banner with little numbers on there. Is there a chance that he could wind up with a third franchise having his number retired?
I think so. I think the Lakers will do it. I think he meets their criteria. He won a championship, bubble though it be. Hey, I still think the bubble. I don't discount it. Like, I think the bubble in some ways broke well for the Heat and Lakers in terms of the rest for coming in and with the players they had at the time. But that was a challenging situation mentally, and the 2 strongest mental teams were the ones left standing in those finals. I think they do. Plus, again, their standard is Hall of Fame. Jamal Wilkes is up there. Some guys that might not, Gail Goodrich, who might not have made it other places. They kind of meet the bottom line criteria once they got in the Hall of Fame. So
interesting. I don't want to get into Durant and Donovan Mitchell yet because I want to sort of do that more as a Heat crosstalk angle since there's a local angle. But here we are. We're in the first week of August. Typically, this is when the NBA closes, when you're more likely to find an NBA executive over in the Amalfi Coast or somewhere over in Italy and having a Magic Johnson birthday party or something like that than you are to see NBA business. This has been such a weird year, as I mentioned to Big O before we started our Inside the Paint, brought to you by Red Recover, as far as the NBA schedule coming out, and we don't know who the super teams that might necessarily be. If we knew who the Brooklyn Nets had and we said this is the team of Durant and Irving, they get the 20 national games. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
Do you still expect major business to be conducted by the NBA in August? Or do you think we're all just going to sit back, and we'll get to this in our next segment, more Heat related? Or do you think we simply are at the whim of Kevin Durant? And could this be an offseason where business gets done in September?
I got a feeling it's more September. You're right. Right now, by the way, I mean, you've probably dealt with this a little.
Crickets.
It's crickets. And half the league's on vacation. Like you said, nobody's had a real vacation for 3 years, right? Like because of COVID and the weirdness there, and then the short off seasons the next 2 years. It's been a long time since even those of us you and I got a chance to get away with family for a while. It's been harder to put those things together. People are taking advantage of it, and it's just, nobody's talking, and I don't want to say, obviously there's some 15th man, two-way stuff getting done, but like there's no real talk right now. I think it's going to go into camp. If they decide they're going to trade Durant, hypothetically, wherever it is, I think that they need the deadline pressure of him either not coming to camp or whatever pressure he might put on them to start moving this needle again, or other teams get into camp, look at their roster and say, you know, we're Boston. Maybe we should throw Marcus Smart or whatever the change is, right? Like whatever the change is, I think that right now they're just, you know how this is, Ira, and I think the fans know this too. You get your roster set, you look at the guys in summer league, you see, and you talk yourself into loving them. Honestly, right. Even if you're in Oklahoma City right now, you got a pretty entertaining team, right? But if you're in San Antonio, you're like, I can't wait to see these young guys. I can't wait to see Josh Primo. Like, you've talked yourself into.
You want to see how they're going to win those 14 games. Exactly. Yes.
But you've talked yourself into loving the roster and the captains in the front offices. So right now they're not there. It's like when they get smacked in the face with the reality of getting to camp and looking at their team and playing a couple of preseason games and going, oh, you know what? That Kevin Durant guy could help us. Like, I think it'll change.
Well, we're up against our first break on Inside the Paint. Our new sponsor brought to you by Red Recover. But after the break, because Kurt is tied into all 30 NBA front offices, he will tell us where the Heat stand in the Kevin Durant and Donovan Mitchell chase. And we'll sort of get a better sense of what the national perspective means for the Heat perspective. Is the NBA done? Are the Miami Heat done? Or is Kurt going to blow our mind? And we'll be back after this on Inside the Paint, brought to you by Red Recover. Ira Winderman back with Kurt Helin on Inside the Paint, brought to you by Red Recover. And unless things change pretty soon, I think there's going to be a whole bunch of executives around the league that could use a little red light therapy, maybe for their foreheads, trying to figure out where the NBA stands. So let's walk this back, Kurt, a little bit. And I know this has filled a ton of entries for you at NBC Sports.
Yeah.
And basically around the league.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, from the moment before free agency starts and you get that blockbuster that Kevin Durant wants out. And yet we've never heard Kevin Durant directly. And let's face it, if Kevin Durant wants a message out, he can go to Twitter. He can go anywhere he wants. He can go to the burner accounts and let us know for sure. He has not done that yet. But the league is still all of the thought there is a Kevin Durant availability out there. There is a deal to be made when Sean Marks sort of comes up with that. And that we know, and this has been put out and not denied by anyone, that the Suns and the Heat are at the top of his wish list. So, Kurt, I have a couple of ways I want to go into this. But first of all, from your perspective, let's not do the when right now. Let's do the if. Will Kevin Durant be traded at some point by Sean Marks and the Brooklyn Nets?
Wow, that's a great place to start because I'm leaning towards that's a coin flip for me right now. Part of it is there isn't, and we can get into this. There just isn't a good offer, whether it's from Miami or that they think is good enough. Because we can, again, we'll talk more about it. I don't think Miami's getting anywhere close to putting Bam in a trade. There are other players they'd like to have that are Brandon Ingram is not on the table right now because the Pelicans kind of like what they've got, and frankly want to see what they've got. I wish I had better sources on this. Like you said, I think even the Nets are a little unsure how serious this was, or was this him trying to get his buddy Kyrie Irving traded? And that's a whole nother mess. There's a one team market for Kyrie Irving.
Kyrie Irving, and it's your market out in LA.
Yeah. And nobody wants Russell Westbrook. And I don't need to go down that road. There's plenty of writing out there about that. But is he trying to do that, or is he serious about wanting out? And I don't know that they completely know. There's rumors that Durant and Josiah are going to sit down this week. True or not, let's put it this way. Whether those rumors are true or not, Ira, don't you think they need to?
Yes.
Like there needs to be a conversation.
And the sourcing on that was Steve Bulpett, who's been from the Boston Herald forever, and now he's working for an independent outlet. And he said that Josiah, the owner of the Brooklyn Nets, who's sort of been frustrated that his super team has been anything but super. So the question I have for you, Kurt, is a lot of times the way these deals happen, when they don't happen in the offseason and they don't happen in the camp, is, I guess for better phrasing or lack of better phrasing, players go James Harden. And they say, I'm going to average 9 points a game, see how much you like that. We saw that with Harden in Houston, forced his way out of the Rockets to the Nets. We saw that with Harden, who was great his first half season with the Nets, all of a sudden start his next team with the Nets, and he was a 9-point-a-game scorer. He went through the motions. He preferred going for donuts instead of apparently layups or three-pointers. That wound up in the wrong situation. But as someone who's covered the league and has been in tune with the league for so long, basically all of Kevin Durant's career, going back to Seattle, people forget he started there, Oklahoma City, over to the championships in Golden State. I have not seen anything in Kevin Durant's comportment and respect for the game that tells me he would do that he would sabotage victory, he would sabotage his team, he would sabotage his front office to get what he wants. Do you think Kevin Durant gets more vocal? Or do you think Kevin Durant is also sort of an entrepreneur and wants to be bigger than basketball? And in some ways, like LeBron James, Rich Kleiman, his sort of agent, his manager, getting him into all different areas also. Do you think Kevin Durant has that in him to be an SOB to force it? Or else could we be going through the start of the season and that December 15th date when free agents in the offseason can be traded and the first week in February at the trading deadline? How hard do you think Kevin Durant pushes this?
I'm with you. By the way, I don't think that's in his nature as just a guy who both puts himself out there, but I think genuinely is somebody who just loves the game. Kevin Durant puts in the work. Say what you will about Kevin Durant. Guy balls. God just puts in the work, and when he can play, he plays. I don't know that he's got, like you said, James Harden in him. Your guy down there in Miami, Jimmy Butler, won it out in Minnesota. I don't think Durant can do that. I don't think he would do that. And I think that that's part of what, and if you're Sean Marks and you're looking at this market, are you still holding out hope? Hey, if we get him and a focused Kyrie Irving in there, and we get Ben Simmons healthy and playing, and we put them together with, by the way, they've got good role players. They've got Patty Mills. They've got Joe Harris. That's a deep, look, if they're healthy, they're now up there with the Heat and the Bucks and the Celtics at the top of the East. Do you hope that works?
And so my question is from an outside valuation standpoint. So I'm going to go a little lightning round with you here as far as you're Andy Ellisberg, you're Pat Riley, you're Adam Simon, you're Nick Arison, you're sitting there in the suite at 601 Biscayne, and every NBA team does this. You might say some players are off limits, but every team has a price. Every player has a value. So I want to start first with Kevin Durant. 34 years old, just 2 seasons ago, sat out the entire season. Remember that injury from winning the championship with the Warriors? That's what complicates this also, in my view, is here you have a Nets team that paid a guy for a full season not to play just because they stood by his side and that he's looking for a divorce right now. Right. Kevin Durant's valuation, is he still, in your view, a player at 34 years old that you give up anything and everything for? I don't know if there's many NBA players like that. Honestly, I don't know today if there's any NBA player like that, because even LeBron, you have the age factor. Yes, LeBron is great, but he's that age. Maybe Steph Curry because of his charisma, even though he's an older player now also. Yeah. Where does Kevin Durant stand in the ultimate sort of Kirk Helin, if I'm doing cryptocurrency valuation? Is Kevin Durant still a top 1, a top 3, a top 5, a must-have? Or is he a guy you can draw a line and go to your fan base and say, you know what? I'm not comfortable trading my 23-year-old Bam or 25-year-old Bam for my 34-year-old Durant. What's Kevin Durant's value right now?
I think for the Heat, by the way, I think you just nailed it. It's 25 for 34. It's first off, and you guys and you would have an interesting take on this. I'd be curious to hear what you think. If you did that, if you traded Bam and whatever else other pieces now you need to make that deal work and a bunch of picks, so you've got Jimmy Butler and Kevin Durant and Kyle Lowry. Is that enough? I'm not sold that it would be. Or look, you'd be better. You'd be in the mix. But now you've got a 2-year window, right?
Yes. And that's the exact point that I've been stressing in all my stories. Kyle Lowry has 2 years left on his contract. He's 36 now. Jimmy Butler's going to get paid through age 36. He's going to be turning 33. So you're looking at the short term. Right. With Bam and Tyler Hero, you have a bridge to the future. You have, hey, we're pretty good now. Made the NBA Finals in 2020. Made 1 game from the NBA Finals in 2022. So we're competitive and interesting. And then you have a bridge to the future with Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo. So this is what I wanted to get you to. Just short answers here. Just want to get your thoughts. If you're the Miami Heat, would you trade Bam Adebayo for Kevin Durant? Well, I know we have to match salaries in other parts.
Yeah.
We'll discard with the ancillaries. We'll pretend there's no salary cap. There's no dollar for dollar. There's no you've got to trade Ben Simmons in order to bring in Bam. Let's just talk about player for player for a second. Would you trade, if you're sitting there at 601 Biscayne FTX Arena, Bam Adebayo for Kevin Durant?
No, because I'm not convinced. I'm doing this trade only, and it's why I think Boston sort of considers it on a certain level. If I'm not, does this trade make me not just a contender? Does this trade make me the team to beat? Am I suddenly, not necessarily 2017 Golden State Warriors, because that was a little unfair to everybody, but but a team that is so good, now they're the favorite and everybody's chasing you. I don't think it does that for the Heat if you get rid of Bam. If you take your all-defensive player and a guy who can give you 19 and 10 out of the lineup every night, I don't know that you fill that position nearly as well. And I don't think it's the same thing. It's why, by the way, I think Boston, you hear Jaylen Brown get mentioned, but they don't want to put in Marcus Smart. Like, how far can you go down?
Exactly. So I'm going to get to that in a second. I'm going to get to that in a second with one of my other examples. Next, a contract and a salary that matches, and a guy that could give you star potential and certainly could light up the city. Not saying it's going to be done. Would you trade Jimmy Butler for Kevin Durant?
Ooh, that's a good one. I probably would, honestly. Okay. I think that'd be a hard one. I don't know that Brooklyn would go for that. But putting that aside, I think Durant's just an upgrade if he's healthy, if he's playing. Jimmy Butler gives you a culture, gives you a strength. He brings some things to the table. The thing I think we keep saying, oh, he's 34. When he played last year, he was in the MVP conversation.
Yes, and the Nets were great when Durant played last year. Yeah,
he is still a top 3, top 5 NBA player when he's on the floor. He is still a guy whose game is going to age pretty well, by the way. When you're 7 feet tall and can shoot over your head from anywhere like he can, like he's going to get his shot off sort of Dirk-like. As much as he's physically might age, he's going to be able to go get you buckets as long as you want buckets. So
okay, so let me give you my third option there, and this is going to be a rolling one because this is sort of the package the Heat are trying. I don't think it will, but I want to keep adding to it. Would you trade Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson for Kevin Durant?
Yeah, I would.
Okay, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I think that's the one. Yeah.
If you're the Heat, would you trade Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, and a first-round pick?
Yes, I might even go to. I might even.
That's where I'm going. Would you trade Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, and 2 first-round picks?
That would be my max offer. Yeah.
So that next one I was going to say, because I think this is what the Nets are looking for. Would you trade Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, and 3 first-round picks?
See, that's probably where I'm drawing the line because, like you mentioned before, I'm already really good. I've already got, you said, your bridge to the future with Adebayo and Hero, and you have the advantage. You got to remember, Miami is still one of the 5 markets in the league, 5 teams, franchises in the league where you guys can recruit superstars to come to you. Like my calculus is different if I am making this choice as the Memphis Grizzlies, who are not in the conversation. But like if I'm in a smaller, different market where if I'm Utah, I can't get free agents to come there. I've got to look at this differently. If I'm Miami, I can't, man, in 5 years, this thing's shifted, but I've still got Bam and I've still got Tyler Hero. Other stars will still want to come and you'll still be able to, they'll still be contenders.
And then the other part of this is, because I know you're like me, and sometimes I'll put out on a slow day a blog in this also. We get all these updated odds of Kevin Durant's next landing spot. We get it from everywhere. It used to be from Blvd, now it's BetOnline USA. It's always with a dot and like AG, like it comes from Anguilla or something like that, or overseas, because apparently these days anyone can run their own sports book. So let's say we agree that Kevin Durant gets traded at some point. And you've seen these odds and they've come out. There was a point the Suns were at the top when they had still DeAndre Ayton available for trade. He's off the table now because of the offer sheet that was matched by the Pacers. If Kevin Durant is not with the Brooklyn Nets, where do you see, and again, if you're going to disappoint Miami Heat fans, his name is Kurt Helin. You can find him at NBC Sports. I'm sure you can get him on Twitter and you can DM him. He'll get back to you. Where would you see Kevin Durant's number one most likely if there is a trade landing spot in the NBA?
Before the season, I still think it's Miami. I still think ultimately, because I don't, well, maybe they would take Boston at the lesser offer of just Jaylen Brown would be the best player they could get, I think, straight up. Like with all due respect to Tyler Hero, Jaylen Brown's the best single available player if they want to go that route. It depends on how many picks are in there, but I'm not sure how serious Miami. I mean, I think Miami's kicking the tires on this because Kevin Durant is. You're also breaking up. I mean, and this is a different topic, but if Boston would have that same conversation you were sort of having, hey, we've got a 5-year window. We just went to the finals and we've got a 5-year window, 7-year window with these guys. Like, do we really want to do this? I'm not sure that they do. I think Miami is a little more willing with all the, as much as they like Hero and Duncan, you'd make that move and you'd put yourself, if you keep Bam, you're probably the betting favorite now, right? Like you become the team to beat in the East. I think that's more likely. And if it holds on into the season and we get closer to that trade deadline, Phoenix will come back into play. They signed Ayton because they had to.
Right.
Monty Williams is the one guy who can smooth over that relationship. He's such a great guy. But if you get to the trade deadline and you can move DeAndre Ayton again, that conversation is back on the table.
Well, and let me bring up another point here, because this is something, and I've dealt with Big O and the Inside the Paint show before. Our friends at Red Recover took over our sponsorship here, and that was this. As we went into the playoffs, every week I would come on my Accurate Pembroke Pines reports with the Big O and the Big O show and our Inside the Paint show and talk about my fear of God of the Brooklyn Nets as a first-round playoff opponent. Because if you have Kevin Durant and you have Kyrie Irving and you had the supporting cast they had and they just got Goran Dragic, you don't want to play them. You want to tank for number 2. You want to play a team that's not in the play-in round. You'll go to 4-5 against the Bulls if you have to. And routinely, Big O would tell me that I was an idiot or a moron or maybe even both of those words. And then you could see the look on his face, whether he had the beard or the facial hair or not at the time, when the Nets were absolutely annihilated by the Celtics in the first round. I'm going to come back to that same place right now. Most people, when you talk about the NBA East, there seems to be a feeling, a collectiveness of there's a big 4 at the top of the East. That you have Boston, that you have Philadelphia, that you have Miami, that you have Milwaukee, which you always forget about, as those are the 4 teams. Right. Kurt, as a national perspective, and you're going to write a lot about this at NBC Sports also. If the Nets start the season with Kevin Durant, with Kyrie Irving, with Joe Harris and his three-point shooting, which they desperately lacked in that playoff series, back in their mix, and some of the subtle moves they made. Hey, the Royce O'Neal trade, I think, was a big deal with Utah. They now can play this thing I think the NBA calls, defense also as well, and have a defensive lineup in there. Where would you put, in a perfect world, a Durant, Irving, I guess they're not big 3 anymore, but Joe Harris. Look at me, Ben Simmons. I left out totally because I have no idea who or what he is. But that Brooklyn team, I just gave you the hierarchy in any order. Philadelphia, Boston, Miami, Milwaukee. Does Brooklyn move into that group? Maybe push the Heat down? Does Brooklyn transcend that group as the new favorite? You remember all last year. No matter what their record was, Brooklyn's going to play for the number 8 seed. They're in the play-in, the NBA favorite, and you're sitting there going, what the F? It makes no sense. How good could Brooklyn be if everyone's heads get together? Like we mentioned, they get together with owner Joseph Tsai. They sit there with Sean Marks. They get Steve Nash with his newly constructed coaching staff in there. How good should we fear? And could Big O still be proven wrong? Should we still fear this incarnation of the Brooklyn Nets? Yeah,
look, there would be a lot of Red Recover in that locker room trying to keep those guys healthy over 82. But yes, that is still. There's so many ifs with this. I mean, it's frankly Durant's like the least of them. It's where's Kyrie Irving's mental state and how many weeks does he need off during the season? And like you mentioned, Ben Simmons, I don't know what he is. Where is he mentally? But if this thing came together, they are, if not the most talented team, one of the most talented teams. And I think the big problem, Ira, is that might be better built for the playoffs. When your defense tightens up, I have 2 guys in Kyrie and Kevin Durant who can just go get a bucket in the middle of the half court no matter what you do. And that makes them a really tough playoff opponent. Again, there's a lot of ifs to get there.
And they
but
have
in
the
a way that
defenders,
Miami or others aren't.
and they have the defenders in the playoffs, like you mentioned. Kevin
Yeah.
Durant's a great defender of his for a scorer that he is. He's also a defender. Ben Simmons is an all NBA level, maybe all defensive player of the year
Great
level
on the ball,
player.
yeah.
O'Neal can do that also. So, as usual,
Nick
and you can learn
Claxton,
one
and
thing about the show.
they can put Claxton in at the center and let that athletic body just go around.
Exactly. I mean, maybe not Jared Allen. Maybe they rethink that, but still another shot blocking defensive presence. So I'm going to move one thing back, like we do often in the show. I do want to hit up Donovan Mitchell big time because I think it's a factor. He was down over the weekend or last weekend playing in Miami at the Pro-Am, played on the same team as Bam Adebayo. We saw all that. So when we come back on Inside the Paint, brought to you by our new sponsor, Red Recover, we're going to get into the Donovan Mitchell angle because it always seems you start with Durant, you go to Mitchell, and then you go from there. Donovan Mitchell, the outside perspective, Kurt Helin, will actually tell us in less than 2 minutes or so where Donovan Mitchell will play this season. All that and more coming up next on Inside. You've done good. You've done good.
Thank you, Ed. By the way, we haven't even gotten to the important thing here for me, which is as we start talking a lot of Heat, Ira, over the course of this season, I have a daughter who starts in the fall at UC Santa Barbara. So there is no Gabe Vincent slander allowed in my presence. He is the lone gaucho in the NBA, and we are going to do nothing but praise Gabe Vincent.
And that's the thing. If we're talking a lot of Gabe Vincent, we're probably in trouble there because last year we spoke a lot of Gabe Vincent, who played very well. Yeah. And we didn't speak enough Kyle Lowry, who missed a lot of time with his personal issues. And then obviously Pat Riley called him out after the season conditioning-wise. We have seen the stuff on the internet. As a matter of fact, I actually pause there. We will get to Donovan Mitchell here in a second. Kurt, when you write your national blogs and you write your national stories for NBC Sports, and you see videos of players in the offseason, and I addressed this in one of my Ask Iras this week at thesunsettled.com, you see players who've lost weight. You've seen players who go in these 5-on-5 open runs and are doing moves you've never seen before. You see He-Man muscle pictures of Tyler Hero. Yeah. How much stock do you put into what you see of players in July and August when it's on their own personal social media?
Like none, almost none, really. I mean, look, if there was a dramatic body change, like you take note, like, hey, so-and-so does look. I kind of hate that. Was it Lang Whitaker who used to keep Muscle Watch blog and just, it was just like, hey, this guy lost 10 pounds. But occasionally you do see somebody you're like, hey, wow, they actually have, like, there was a point with Kevin Love kind of being like the most obvious. You were like, well, all right, Kevin Love put in some work. Kevin Love changed his physical look. You see it occasionally, but the other part is when you see them like tearing up pro-ams and Banchero shows up in Seattle and drops the numbers and guys do it in the Drew League. And look, I've been to Drew League games. The level of play is pretty good, but I don't think people always appreciate how good NBA players are at basketball compared to even guys who played in college or just, what it's such a ridiculous other level. And if you put an elite talent, if you put Trae Young in a pro-am game, he's going between people's legs and throwing passes off the backboard because everything's, it's me playing pickup against 7-year-old kids. Like, suddenly I'm like, wow, everything moves so much slower for them. I can just completely dominate
it's like, okay, he just kicked the butt of the guy who sells you the shoes at Foot Locker, but exactly how does that translate? So yes, Tyler Hero has looked He-Man for the second straight offseason. Need to see it in camp. James Harden's told us and shown us that he's back in shape. Need to see that in camp.
Yeah.
The one time I'll believe this side of the equation, when you're looking at players who've put on muscle, who've lost the weight, who've added to their game, when on their same social media, they show when they've added the weight, when they've slowed down, when they've missed shots. It's all so curated. And again, the one thing that always gets me about social media, and especially now Instagram and Instagram Live and TikTok to a degree, who are these people that people always have around taking the videos? In other words, Victor Oladipo every day is showing his incredible workouts. He's been on the football field. He's been on the gym. He's been on the basketball court. But he's not shooting selfies. It's almost like they have their own videographer there. Oh, no. And I am sure before they post anything, Vic is coming over and going, okay, use that. No, don't use that. That doesn't look good. That doesn't look good. So you never really get the true off-season picture of someone. Now, on one hand, it makes for great blogs. It makes for great tweets where you can have fun with it. Right. On the other hand, you have to reel it in. One thing that is real, though, and I want to get to this because before we run out of time here, and again, if you missed any of our Inside the Paint show brought to you now by Red Recover, you can go back, catch the podcast of each of the first 2 segments here. but I want to get to Donovan Mitchell because I think, unlike Durant, I think this will happen.
Yes.
Because Danny Ainge is changing the culture to Danny Ainge culture of starting all over again. I think the Rudy Gobert trade with Minnesota not only showed you can get 5 first-round picks for and a current first-round pick player, but that he's going to blow up the whole situation and remake the team in his own design. So let's do the percentage game, since Blvd and all these other gambling companies send us out the odds on chances of things happening. What percentage chance before the start of training camp do you believe that Donovan Mitchell will be traded by the Utah Jazz?
Before the start of training camp, I'll say 75%. I still think it's really likely it gets done. Like you said, it's if he comes to camp, and look, Donovan will maybe one of the nicest guys in the league. We'll show up and put in the work and say all the right things and not be a problem. But everybody knows what's coming. Exactly. Everybody knows what's coming. So it's really a matter of when, not if. And by the way, is Danny Ainge the guy who, like, he loves tearing things up? Like, is he the guy who walks down the beach and, like, knocks over sandcastles so he can build his own? Like he just tears down.
And that's the thing. Utah wasn't bad. And Utah was one of the model franchises of the NBA, is always being competitive, sort of a Heat of the NBA West to a degree. Yeah. They were going to give you something, that Quinn Snyder was going to push for every victory, that they were going to find a way. Now, in the playoffs, when Rudy Gobert got played off the floor defensively because he couldn't switch out on the perimeter and all of a sudden he was off the court, they weren't nearly the same playoff team as they were a regular season team. So with Donovan Mitchell, we know what Danny Ainge wants. He wants the largest haul ever of first-round picks. We know what the New York Knicks have available. Yeah. Arguably the largest availability of first-round picks this side of Sam Presti, who just collects them, never trades them, just turns them into more future first-round picks, and isn't ready to live in the moment because no one's required that of him yet. Those odds that come out, percentage of teams, we've heard nothing but New York Knicks are front runners. There's background there. His dad worked in the New York Mets media relations department. He's been at a ton of New York Knicks games. He spends his time working out in the offseason in New York. Is New York the clear and overwhelming favorite, or because they're the Knicks, do they always have a way of screwing it up at the end?
Yes, they do, but I still think that because they are the Knicks, but I still think they're the overwhelming favorite. As much as I think Miami puts together an interesting package, and a couple other teams maybe you could if you wanted to. You mentioned it. Danny Ainge wants picks. He is rebuilding this thing. He is tearing it down. He wants as many picks as he can get his hands on, and that's what the Knicks have. The Knicks have what he wants, which is why I ultimately think that's what gets done. Right?
And there's so many directions we can go here with this. So I sort of want to do I think, and again, if you disagree with me, Kurt, please let me know. But right now I'm looking at a big four in the East in some order, Philadelphia, Boston, Miami, Milwaukee. As of now, the known quantities. Would you agree with that?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
I think those are your top four.
The New York Knicks, let's say they just send out draft capital, maybe some ancillary pieces, whether it has to be an RJ Barrett, but let's leave that aside for a second. A New York Knicks team with Jalen Brunson, Donovan Mitchell, Julius Randle, argument's sake, we're going to leave in RJ Barrett. Okay, so I'm going to give you those four players. Where does that fit in that big four hierarchy? Or even, I think Toronto could be a cusp team as a number 5. We have Brooklyn in as a number 6. So let's say the 4 teams I mentioned, Toronto, Brooklyn, and I'm not even mentioning Chicago because I don't know if they're for real or not. Does a Donovan Mitchell trade acquisition make the Knicks any better than 6 or 7 in the East?
No, I don't think so. I think they're 5. 5 could happen. Like I think that could happen. And like you said, there's the wild card of we don't like Brooklyn, whatever.
Right.
Who knows? Right. But I don't think so. I think honestly, what they've created or would create in that trade is Portland East, which is we are an undersized backcourt that can't defend. We are in trouble in the playoffs. We're going to be entertaining. Like Donovan Mitchell is going to be fun, and Jalen Brunson is going to be a fun backcourt to watch. They are going to win games. They are going to put up points in the regular season. It's an interesting team. Madison Square Garden will love it, and then they will get into a postseason matchup against the Heat and be like, wow, our guards cannot stick with these guys. Like, we just don't have the size to match up. And Kyle Lowry's undersized. You could argue undersized. but Kyle Lowry defends, right? Like
he's a defensive SOB. Basically, what he's saying is the Knicks are going to come out with the all Tyler Hero defensive backcourt.
Right, exactly.
And we saw Tyler sort of get eviscerated by everyone in the playoffs and have to hide him to a degree.
Yeah, so
then the injury took him out. So let's go to part B. And again, if you missed it in our Inside the Paint brought to you by Red Recover, this was in our second segment when we lined up Heat players we would or would not trade for Kevin Durant. So let's do that. And I think it's going to be easier this time around.
Yeah.
Let's go to Donovan Mitchell. I know draft picks are the capital that the Jazz want. I get that. But let's just talk about players from a Heat perspective. Because, again, this could be a three-way deal anyway. Do you trade Bam Adebayo in a package for Donovan Mitchell?
Not even close.
I agree. I think it's simple. We don't have to harp on that. Do you trade Jimmy Butler in a package for Donovan Mitchell?
Nope. No, not doing that one either.
Here's one. And, again, I'm curious of your perspective. Because, again, you're talking about the reigning NBA Sixth Man of the Year. So you're talking about someone who's a known quantity, especially for your Heat system. Do you trade Tyler Hero for Donovan Mitchell?
Yeah, I would. And I think that the advantage is you're giving up a couple of years, but I do know what Donovan brings every night. I know what he brings on the court, but also I know how good he is in the community, how good he is in the locker room. And it's not that Tyler isn't those things, but I think you get a more polished, better version slightly. And maybe Hero can reach that level. I'm not convinced he can. I think Donovan's just going to end up being a slightly better player who can create a little more for himself. So I would put Tyler in a deal. But that would be, like I said, if you want Tyler, it might, again, we're back to the picks debate. Okay, so
I'm going to interrupt you there, Kirk, because I'm going to play the picks debate. So the deal would probably have to be from a money standpoint, Tyler and Duncan Robinson, the universal matching contract. Tyler, Duncan Robinson, and one first-round pick. Would you give that up if you were the Heat?
Yeah, I'd do that one. I would. Would you do it?
Would I do it? I'm gonna go to number 2 then, because I think this is where we're gonna have the debate. Tyler, Duncan Robinson, and 2 first-round picks.
See, that's a tough one. I would. Here's the thing: if I'm the Knicks, after years of frustration, I would probably do it. And I don't. I know if I were the Heat, though.
Yeah, that's where I wanted to get you for this reason, Kurt, because this is something that happened. Matter of fact,
you do keep, by the way, well, I guess Hero's young too, though. I'm like, Donovan Mitchell's on the Bam timeline, but is it worth 2 first-round picks? I don't know that it is. Once you get into, and by the way, Duncan Robinson we're throwing out as a contract. Guy can play. Like, guy does have skill.
No, he can be the shooter. If they're going to move Bogdanovich or someone else, he can be their floor spacer. I get that also. Here's the point. Matter of fact, this is going to bring your career full circle from when you told us in our first segment on Inside the Paint, brought to you by Red Recover, when you started your Lakers blog, when Shaq was traded to the Heat and everything started there with Kobe. When Shaq was traded to the Heat, believe it or not, Big O was on the air back then. Yeah. I was on his show, and we were speaking about a Heat trade. At the time, the proposal was Lamar Odom, Brian Grant, and a Heat first-round pick. The Lakers wanted more. I went back and forth with Big O about whether Caron Butler, who was then had a very good rookie season, would be thrown in. And Big O was, no, it's too much. You can't mortgage your future. We went back and forth. Over the years, Big O has come around a bunch and has said, hey, Shaq won a championship. If you can open that window, you go for it. He changed the arc of Pat Riley and where the Heat were. So it's one more. So here's why I sort of delayed my answer to that. If you're willing to give up Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, and 1 first-round pick, are you going to let 1 more first-round pick be the deal breaker?
That's a really good question. Maybe not, because I think you mentioned it before. Like, under the best of circumstances, it's not going to be easy to get out of the East again this year. Like, it is just with Boston, who got better, with Philadelphia, who got better, and James. We'll discuss James Harden in the playoffs some other day. But they got better, around him with PJ Tucker, with whatever, everybody else and whatever Brooklyn is. It's hard. Milwaukee gets healthy. Like, I don't know how you might need that. Donovan Mitchell's made some playoffs. Like, he is shut with all their Rudy Gobert issues. He has put up big numbers in the postseason. He is a guy who shows up in those moments. Who, like you said, he has spent time in the offseason in Miami too, and loves it down there. I might do it because he's young enough that he continues as that bridge. You don't just fall off a cliff in a couple of years with like you do with Durant, a Durant trade. This is we keep being good for years, and we can get other guys in here around them. And I think that makes some sense, but I'd try not to give up that second one, man.
Okay, and then I want to end this conversation here because I want to get to one more talking point before I have to wrap up our show this week on Inside the Paint. We know the Jazz want first-round picks. We know the Knicks could probably comfortably, a lot of protected, give up to 5 first-round picks and any salary filler. I'm of the thought, and people go, whoa, the Heat are limited. They only have a maximum of 3 first-round picks they could trade if they work with Oklahoma City to unlock a pick. So they could trade 3. I say they could trade 4 because Nikola Jovic is a first-round pick who hasn't started. We've already seen the Jazz take Walker Kessler, the first-round pick out of Auburn from Minnesota, to augment their pick package. I say the Heat can trade up to 6 first-round picks, and here's why. They have 3 first-round picks they could do organically, their own picks, if they unlock the Oklahoma City pick. I'm counting Jovic as a first-round pick. That's a 4th. Yeah. But I think this could happen. Kirk Helin, putting you on the spot now as we wind down the clock on our Inside the Paint. Could Tyler Hero in the open market fetch 2 first-round picks? In other words, instead of dealing him to the Jazz, or as part of a 3-team trade, when you deal him to the Jazz, could they reroute him for 2 first-round picks? I think yes. Do you think Tyler Hero has enough value as defending 6th man of the year for a team that might not be able to recruit him in free agency to get 2 first-round picks?
They're not unprotected, I don't know, Thunder picks or something.
Right.
But yeah, I think so. I think that he's got that kind of value. He's got the advantage now too and we didn't even get into this. He's up for his extension.
And that'll be next week's theme on Inside the Paint, brought to you by Red Recover, because I gave you a bunch of things. Anyway, I wanted to throw that out there because I think that he can produce the pick package by either having the Jazz acquire Tyler, sending him out for picks because Danny Ainge can constantly move, make that a 3-team trade. Last thing
Tyler Hero would not fit what they're trying to do.
Yes, last thing here, we're up against it. I want Big O because I know there's plenty of Dolphins talk going on today. Also, last thing, Bam Adebayo said at his youth camp over the weekend, his goal is to be Udonis Haslem 2.0 to spend his entire career with the Heat. And we'll touch again on this next week. Bam Adebayo spending his entire career in today's transaction-happy NBA with working for a transaction-happy Pat Riley, with cap number squeezer Andy Ellisberg who can make any math work. Yes or no? Can Bam Adebayo play his entire career with the Miami Heat, or is the NBA simply too fluid and too transitory to even think about that in August 2022?
It's too fluid, too transitory. He might end up being, he might be the guy who plays the most of his career, the heart of his career with it. And I mean, let me be honest with you. If you told me Steph Curry plays the last 2 years of his career in Charlotte, where his hometown, I'd be like, yeah, I could see it. I could see that Joe Montana end of the career going to play somewhere else for a couple of years, but that's not how you think of him happening with Bam. But I do genuinely believe he wants to stay there. And Ira, there's not a lot of better foundational core pieces. If you're going to put a cornerstone together, Bam is a beautiful cornerstone piece, man. You don't give those up easily.
I agree. So much. It's funny. I gave Kurt a show sheet, and we probably hit about 10% of that, which shows there will be plenty of fodder throughout August, whether the NBA agrees or not. But a really nice start, Kurt. Enjoyed being together with the reunion here, even if you have to get up a little bit earlier on the West Coast. Again, this was this week's edition of Inside the Paint, brought to you by Red Recover. If you need red light therapy like the NBA trade market does right now, you know where to go. You can find it on our screen right now. We'll be back next Wednesday, 9 a.m. for another edition of Inside the Paint as the Big O Show rolls on.
This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.